Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Arizona Mountain Gardening. This episode, we're going to learn a lot about preserving the bounty of our garden. For example, we're here at the Care Cole Sustainability Living Center in Taylor, Arizona, where we're going to learn a lot about dehydrating food. There'll also be lots of information on other ways to can and preserve our food. So please join us as we learn a lot about getting that food ready for harvest and enjoying it this winter. We're enjoying this beautiful day today here in Taylor, Arizona at the Care Cole Sustainable Center, and we're with the resident manager, Tony Tengelos.
Yeah, so we're here. I've been here about 2 years as the resident manager. It's a 10-acre property that was started by Barbara Kerr and Sherry Cole in the early 1980s to teach people about sustainable living. And one of the primary things they taught people about was the use of the sun to create free energy, whether it's a solar cooker, a solar hot water heater, a solar distillery. And today we're going to be talking about this green box over here, which is a solar downdraft dehydrator. It's a wonderful box that allows you to dehydrate food in the most 1 or 2 days through a very intelligently designed solar downdraft dehydrator.
So with our bounty from the garden, we want to preserve our food. Dehydration is an ancient way of preserving food, as I understand it. And here we have this great, unique dehydrator that Tony's going to tell us more about.
Yeah, it was designed with some principles in mind, one of which is the air intake to get to the heating element is on the north side of the dehydrator. It's right down here. So there's where the air enters, and it goes below the floor of the dehydrator. And then it gets to the south side, which is obviously the side that faces the sun, where the heating element is. And one of the reasons for the air intake being on the north side instead of on the south side is that tends to slow the air flow through the dehydrator, so that instead of a lot of warm air flowing through the dehydrator, hot air, it slows it down. It's like a little bit of a break. It allows the air to get really hot and do more effective dehydration with hot air than with warm air.
So there's the importance of situating your dehydrator in the garden or at your property.
Yes, yeah, and that works. And then the heating element's on the south side, and it's a very large panel with translucent glass that is more effective at allowing the heat to get to the heating element than a transparent glass. And then the heating element is black paper that absorbs the sun's heat and really supercharges that air and pushes it up to the top of the dehydrator. And then the dehydration, the hot air comes through the dehydrator and drops down through the food, and in a downdraft scenario. So the air is going down, and then it comes out through a channel in here and comes up inside the wall and comes out. And again, instead of just having the air just exit here, it's forced to come up here and out, which again puts a little bit of a brake job on the airflow, which allows hotter air to move more slowly than warm air moving very fast.
Tony, you mentioned about downdraft being an important feature of this dehydrator. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Sandra, there's several reasons why downdraft works good. First of all, you need a heating element to absorb the heat, so it creates, height. And so if it was an updraft dehydrator and your heating element was outputting here, your food would be up high, and you might even have to get on a stool to load your food. But with a downdraft function, you have your food at a very usable height to monitor it, to load it, to retrieve it. That's one reason. A second reason, on partly cloudy days like we have today, the heat doesn't get as hot, obviously, as on a sunny day. And when it's intermittent heat, the downdraft has a much more reliable flow of air than an updraft dehydrator, and it captures the moisture a lot better, and it exits it a lot better. And whereas an updraft dehydrator, the element can actually slow, and it would cause mildew and mold in the foods.
I see there's a few different kinds of fruits that you have growing, or pardon me, dehydrating here. What would be kind of the time frame on getting things to dry?
Well, we've used this quite often here at the Kerr Cole Center, and any kind of round fruit like a nectarine, a pear, a peach, an apple, they dehydrate generally in about 24 hours. Zucchini, for instance, zucchini squash, yellow and green squash, they dehydrate in 4 or 6 hours. If you put them out in the morning, check them by noon, 1 o'clock, they're like poker chip hard. And then bananas, which is one of my favorites, is one of the longer durations. That takes up to 2 or even 3 days to get the banana really dehydrated.
Some of the vegetables we grow at the garden that are common are zucchini and tomato. So as far as dehydrating them, what would be some tips on doing that?
Well, the tomatoes actually dehydrate really good, and all of this stuff is very delicious. When you have dehydrated fruit, it intensifies the flavor bouquet, so it's a real pungent flavor, which is really enjoyable. Some of the tips are just, make sure you're going to have sunny days, because if it's a cloudy day, the food is more prone to become moldy and mildewy than it is if it's a sunny day. And to keep monitoring them, because when you have a dehydrator like this, it dehydrates so fast, Sandra, that you can sometimes dry out the food to where it's too dry if you don't check it very frequently.
That makes me think about the herbs that I really enjoy. Would this be a good way to dehydrate herbs, or would they?
You can dehydrate just about anything.
Okay.
Someone had mentioned maybe try some meat in there. I haven't tried meat yet, but being a carnivore, I'm actually going to take some thin strips of meat and put it in there and see how it works. Absolutely, and it's very easy to build, and we have plans here at the Kerr Cole Sustainable Living Center for how to build this with drawings and a text description of, it's about an 8-page set of plans, and they're available for sale for I think $3. They just want a token donation. And we do tours here at the Kerr Cole Center every second Saturday of the month at 11 o'clock. So they're open to the public, and we do an entire tour of the whole property, which includes the passive solar house, a variety of solar hot water heaters, and solar cookers that Barbara invented, and they even have a solar in-wall oven there that she patented. So they've really used the sun to use this facility to teach people how to use the sun to create free hot water, free distilled water, free cooking, free dehydrating, and even free heating of your home.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I've been living here for 2 years, and it's just wonderful. Not writing checks to APS, I'm just letting the sun do its thing. It's very enjoyable.
Hello, welcome to the White Mountains Community Gardens. Here we have a very special volunteer red sunflower, and we want to be able to grow more next year. So we have covered the one plant that is going dormant, and we'll collect the seeds and have plenty more red sunflowers next year. But do know this was a volunteer, and it's very special to us. So happy growing.
So we really want to preserve the bounty from our garden, and what a better way to do it than learn about canning and food preservation. We're fortunate to have Chantal Skousen here with us today. She's a master food preserver, certified by Utah State University Extension Office. So we're pretty excited about having her here and learning some strategies both on water bath and pressure canning today, and a little bit about dehydration and fermentation.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here today. I absolutely love teaching canning. It's one of my favorite things to do is canning. And it's like an illness, like you catch the canning bug and you can't shake it. You just keep going and going and going. So who knows who came up with the idea of canning? No. Hey, anybody from the garden want to answer? Napoleon. Yeah, so he was out there doing his thing, marching all over that part of the world, and he wanted to have his troops' rations extended, and so he said, hey, you've got to come up with something here. I've got to feed these guys for a long time. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and we need food. But canning is a science. As science progresses, we learn more things, right? So just yesterday, I love rocks and I love geology, and I saw an article about a new fault or tectonic plate that they've discovered. And that kind of goes with canning. Like, new things are discovered all the time, right? And so, you know, we have folks that are like, well, this is how grandma did it. That's okay. But canning, you know, we have food safety people, we have our extension offices, and they're working to make sure we do this safely. And so, yeah, things do change over time. And it is a science in that we have to adjust for things. We will talk about too, adjusting for our altitude. We're up here quite high, so we need to make sure that we're extending time or changing our pressure to account for that. Because botulism is a nasty, nasty thing that you don't want and you don't want to share. So that's it. Why does pH matter? It matters because botulism cannot survive in an acidic environment. And your fruits are going to have enough acid in there to kill those botulism spores. Tomatoes are kind of ride the line, and so it's suggested that we add lemon juice to our jars for tomatoes, and it's just 2 tablespoons per quart, and you just put it right in the jar, and then you add your tomato product to it. If it's lower in pH, your low acid foods, your meat, beans, vegetables, you're going to use a pressure canner. And that is because botulism survives up to 240 degrees. And water boils at what temperature at sea level? You didn't know there was a test? 212 degrees at sea level. As you go up, it's going to lower that temperature. So we're higher up, so it doesn't boil right at 212. This is the Presto, and it has a gasket. I didn't get it out. It has a gasket, and I've replaced this once in the 9 years that I've had it. So they do last a while. You just want to check and make sure, like, this is a new one, that it's not cracked and that it's not stretched out or shrunk. I check it every time I can with it. I check my gasket, and then before I can, right here is our steam vent. I like to just kind of look through it to make sure I can see through it, and that's important that you can see through that. Now, this is a dial gauge. There's also a weighted one, and they kind of look like this, and there's some of them are a series, or some of them are ones that you can adjust to set on there. I prefer this. That is my preference because I like to see exactly what it's at. So that's for me. Now, your dial gauge does need to be tested once a year at your extension office, and it's kind of just like a bicycle pump, and they just make sure that it's reading the right pressure. Unfortunately, these ones can't be adjusted. It was $15 on Amazon, and it came with the nut and the washers and everything. So it's not bad to replace that. I've replaced it once in the 8 years that I've had it. The other features on these lids, this is the lid lock. When you lock your lid down and it starts to build pressure, this pops up and you can't open your lid. When the pressure is completely out of it, it'll fall back down. Then you know it's safe to open your canner. This little guy right here is a little rubber stopper. This is the overpressure. So if this hits this thing where it says caution, danger, it'll pop that loose and you'll lose everything in your canner because the pressure drops, but it's not going to explode. Another part of the science for canning is you have to make sure that you're not putting a cold jar in hot water or vice versa, because these jars are not tempered and they crack and the bottom falls out, and it's not fun and it's sad. If you hear something pop inside, let it finish, as long as you don't hear it continue to pop, because sometimes the jar will break in there and it happens. Just let it finish its thing and then survey the damage when it comes out. Jars break because they're old, or they may have like a bubble in them, or if you use a metal, like a butter knife, to scrape your jar out, or to pop the bubbles inside there before processing, it'll scratch the jar and it can cause it to break. So I always suggest you just use your little plastic spatula or a wooden dowel, something that's not gonna scratch that jar. Okay, the shelf life and storage. So to store your jars, if you look at my jars over there, it's kind of hard to see because I brought you guys something to taste. I don't have rings on them. Okay, so your rings are only needed when you're processing and during cool down time. Take your rings off. Can you guys guess why? I know you know the answer, so you can't answer. What's that? they're vacuum sealed, and so you don't need them on there. But if your jar is in a spot, say the sun shines through that window and you've got a pretty jar sitting over here, and maybe the sun shines on your jar and it warms it up and it pops that seal, with the ring on, it can re-close and you'll never know. And you don't know what jumped in there to be friends with your preserved food. Your shelf life, about a year is what you want to aim for. Now, that's not saying that if it's past a year, you should chuck it. Just to kind of wrap up a little bit here. Once we're all done and we have our beautiful jars, we're going to put our date on them. We're going to put what it is, because sometimes, I don't know, maybe you did a special recipe, or you made some with no salt, or you put some chicken broth in there with your chicken and you want to mark that on your lid. And then we're just going to wipe it down, take our rings off, we're going to put it on our shelves and store it nice and pretty. Inside your folders too, I have like a canning inventory. You can do whatever you want, but this is for me so I can keep it all together, and so I can go check how many do I have, you know, is it still looking good, because I want to check my jars, make sure it looks good. And you know, start with your date that you can, and then like a 3-month checkup to a year, and you can extend that as long as it's still looking pretty good. My biggest advice for you is just stick with your tested recipes that you're going to find in these books, okay? Be safe. If you have a question, ask. Okay, there are no stupid questions, I promise. And you know, have fun. It seems labor intensive, but in the end, it all pays off, and you'll have a lot of fun.
Hi, my name is Susan. I've been a member of the community garden here in Show Low this is my 2nd year. I'm here today to talk a little bit about succession planning, which is a way of getting more production out of your garden, particularly if you have a small space. Also throughout the season, there's things you can do to grow more and in a short period of time. This is a good example right here. Back here we have some rhubarb plants that were harvested in the spring. And when we were done with that, we then put in zucchini seeds. So the rhubarb's done in the very same space. We are now harvesting zucchini within just a few short months. We actually put these zucchini seeds in the first week of July. So that gave us, and we still had plenty of time to get a lot of zucchini. So that's one example. Over there farther, we did the same thing with the asparagus. We harvested the asparagus and then put in yellow squash plants, and those are thriving now. Here's an example of a nice row of greens, different lettuces, where the succession planning has been going on. At the end of the row, you'll see the greens that we're probably picking now. They're getting pretty mature. They're perfect to eat. In the front, they've already been picked and newer little plants are coming up. And so when those are done, then these will be ready, and that's how we make this work throughout the season. Now some of these taller ones here actually are already tall and going to seed. They're not this one right now isn't very good for eating, and it's getting seeds, and we'll save those seeds for later plantings. But that's a perfect example of, in one row, continuously having fresh greens every week. A whole beautiful variety.
We're over at the White Mountain Community Garden, and this particular garden, which begins from this row of peppers and tomatoes at the other end and moves forward over this way to tomatoes on this end, was built by my wife Melissa and I. I'm Danny Sucut, and we kind of came into this a little bit late this year, and so we didn't really have much to work with. And I've built raised beds since I've really started seriously gardening, which has been probably about 15 or 16 years ago. These are raised beds, and there's a certain way of building them. And we started with the soil that was already in the ground, what we had, and when we didn't have enough soil to build up the bed, then we used supplements that are in front of me back here, and we added that to it, so we had enough to build up a proper raised bed. There's kind of a couple of important things about them is the fact that they need to be, probably at least 6 to 8 inches high, if possible, and they need to be level. The reason for leveling is because when you level, the nutrients and the water don't run off the beds, and they get more evenly distributed. And that's one of the rules that I've come to understand in gardening, is that consistent feeding and consistent watering are very important to a highly productive garden. So that's what we try to do here. I feed these plants probably every 7 to 10 days, fairly consistently. I don't always have control over consistent watering because of the weather that we have and the rain and those kinds of things. But we do have a watering system here that we can set to a timer. And it's kind of a new system in the community garden this year. So we've kind of had some bugs in it. So consistent watering out here hasn't been a strong point, but consistent feeding has kind of helped offset that somewhat. And that's why it took about a month. I was mostly working alone, so it took me about a month to build about 11 beds that would be approximately 40 feet long. Just, as I was able to do that. So this garden started about a month after, was planted about a month after everybody else. But because of the fertilizing and trying to consistently water, it has had a tendency to catch up and in some cases surpass the other gardens in the area here. One of the things about the beds, soil is a growing medium. It doesn't have to have really a lot of nutrients in it because you can add supplements. It's nice if it does, but you can just start with what you have. pH can be critical because too high or too low can cause the plants not to uptake the proper minerals that they need, which is shown in the health of the plant. So if they're not getting what they need, just like our human bodies, that compromises plant immune systems. And then they're more susceptible to diseases and pests and other things that might not bother them so much. Everybody kind of worried about the strawberries, and I'm kind of we have 3 rows of strawberries here. And I didn't know either what they were going to do, but this is an ever-bearing day neutral strawberry, so it doesn't need full sun all the time. And it is a strawberry that bears throughout the season. And the strawberries have done very well in this soil, actually. They were started as, they weren't started from plants, they were started as bare root strawberries. So there really wasn't much to them when they were planted and nothing to look at. And just pretty much a root system with the crown on it. And that was about it. And it's taken, about 2 months for them to get to this point. And they are loaded with strawberries, and they're decent size. This is one that I've grown before, and since I started growing it, it has become the golden standard of strawberries. So every other ever-bearing strawberry is measured against this as far as production, color, taste, size, and all those good things. Sometimes people have come to me and said, how do you do a garden like that? How do you get a garden to produce like you do? And some gardens I have been amazing when everything was just right. And that's usually not the case, but once in a while you have that. And I say, well, number one, it's hard work. You have to spend time. If you just go out there and dig a furrow and throw the seed in and just water it once in a while and don't feed and don't pay attention to it, well, that's about what you're going to get on the end. But if you take time with it, you watch it, you take care of it, you nourish it, you water it, you watch out for diseases and problems, and you try to catch them early, you work with them, chances are you'll have a good productive garden.
Well, Danny, you really did a great job on your garden, getting started literally from the ground up.
Well, it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work too, but everybody else has had a good time too, and it's a good place to be. It's a good place to be in the garden. I've always enjoyed that, and it looks like you've done well with your gardening this year too.
Yeah,
Sandra.
the herbs look fantastic, and I'm always struck by the beautiful bounty that we have here in the garden. This time of year, it's pretty inspirational.
It is inspirational. It's been a real blessing to see what's come in. It's a good garden, and it's good in a lot of ways because we're trying a lot of new things this year, so we weren't sure how things were going to turn out, and we've had some problems, but we've worked to overcome those things as best we can, and we're still getting good produce, and I think we could say that this was a successful garden year.
Yep.
How about you, Sandra?
Absolutely. That's a big part of the adventure, is just kind of going with the flow, see what does well year to year, and we're always learning a lot, and we're learning from each other. That's really the great thing about a community garden.
Yes, and I think speaking of learning from each other, we'd like to invite the community to come out at any time they'd like to and walk through our garden and talk to us about it, and maybe think about joining us. It's the White Mountain Community Garden Club, and it's a good place to be with a lot of good people around us, and I'm sure you would at least enjoy a walk through with taking a look at the garden and seeing what we've done and seeing some of the ideas. And there's a lot of people here that have a lot of experience and different ideas, and it's always fun to talk with them and learn new things. That's how I feel about it, Sandra.
Yep, absolutely. So we invite everyone not only to come to the garden, but tune in next time right here from the heart of Show Low, Arizona.